I thought it would be helpful to everyone to kind of go over how we rate after you've given us all your exposure information, or the process that we have to go through to come up with your rates each year. So I'm going to kind of go through this. First, I wanted to just kind of give you a timeline why we're already looking at 2020. We're just starting into 2019, but we've already got to start into 2020 on collecting all the data from you. So as Marty talked about, HCA that's kind of the first step. They start this month on their appraisals. And I had to step out, Marty, but did you talk about who's being appraised this year? Or?
No.
So the counties that are up for appraisal are Box Elder, Daggett, Duchesne, San Juan, and Uinta. So I don't know if they've contacted you already. Oh. But they've been pretty easy to work with. So please let us know if you have any problems. But it's a 5-year process. So every 5 years we'll do your full appraisal. So then starting this month, we want you to start looking at your exposures, of course, as Marty talked about. And we like to have everything final, your affirmations in by June. So that's our timeline with the exposures. Then that's when myself and Marty start working pretty hard. So all of July, we're trying to gather the data, put it in the format that our actuary needs, that our reinsurance provider or excess provider needs. So it takes a little bit of time to compile all that data in the format that they need. By the Numbers Actuarial Consultant is our actuarial group, and they start working on our rate study in August. We need to they're pretty good now because they've worked with us so long. They kind of know what our data is going to look like, what our losses will look like. They do our reserve analysis. So if we give them a couple of weeks, they can usually provide the information we need to look at the rates and work on the contribution. CRL is County Reinsurance Limited. They're a reinsurance carrier, and they also need all that data compiled in a certain format so that they can get their rates for our excess limits. In August, after we so I usually get the rate study completed by the actuary about a week before the board meeting in August. So at that time, I'm working again trying to compile and provide scenarios based on the rate analysis and the rates provided by CRL to give those scenarios to the board to look at and decide on what they're going to approve as rates for 2020. So we do that on that timeline so that the counties and the members all have their contribution, or at least their preliminary contribution to put into their budgets, because they start their budget process in September. So that's always been our goal, to give you that number. And the only reason it would deviate from that number we give you in your budget letters is if you've added a whole new fleet to your exposures. So we look at those exposures again in December before we send out your final invoice, and so that number may go up and down. And then on that, I just wanted to kind of go over how much data we have to compile for just the actuary and the rate study to be completed. So they ask for 3 years exposure data. So we have to give them all the final from 2018, 2019, and then what you provided to us in June of 2020. They look at all our year loss data. So from the inception of 1992 to June of 2019, they'll look at all that loss data, and that goes into their indications for the rates. The excess recoveries is anything over our $250,000 self-insured retention. Any payments that have gone into our excess layer, they have to have data compiled for that. So Corby and Marty put a lot of different schedules together for that information. Preliminary budget. So the board has to approve a preliminary budget at their July meeting. So in July, we give them preliminary numbers. So that's kind of a, we don't have the rate back yet, but we do have to give a preliminary budget amount to the actuaries. Return on investment, they require that, but we really don't rely as a pool on the investment income when we're considering rates, but they like us to give an estimate of what we expect the rate of return to be on our investments. Then, once we have all of your exposure data, I run it through the formula that we used for rates the prior year, and the actuary needs that data. So what the new exposures look like at the current rates. We've always been given them pretty low, like a 1%, because we are subject to the Money Management Act. So we're limited on investments we can do. So we've kind of lowballed it the last few years to 1%. I don't know if the board or if we'll ever consider, because we have been getting a better return, like a 2% on our investments. Most of it is in PTIF. We do, a few years ago, we put $2 million into Zion's Wealth Advisors, and I know we do have equity in our County Reinsurance Limited, and I know they're looking at a new program that maybe pools can contribute more into equity because they aren't limited to their investments. So we may get a higher return on that. We're looking at that this year, if that's something we can consider as a pool. But we haven't even, at the next meeting, we're going to, April meeting.
Our banks would need some money off there because they'll guarantee like a 0.5% more than what PTIF is.
Oh, really? And some of your banks, yes.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah, because I think PTIF's at 2.6 now. 2.6. So, and then we also have to provide them with, with members that have or want a higher deductible. So we do have one member right now that has a $100,000 deductible on property. And so we need to give them, if any other counties want that, they develop a deductible factor for us. Okay, so the next one, this after the rate study is usually about anywhere between 75 pages to 100 pages, and it comes down to 2 schedules that I looked out of all of that. And so this is one of them. So this is so if you look at this, I don't know how do you do your little
There's
pointer?
a green
The little
line.
green.
Yep.
Okay, so what the board has kind of looked at before is this expected level that they have at 6.1. This is from, this is for 2019, so, this is just what we did last year to come up with your contributions. So they give us this schedule that we look at, and this is what the board considers. Now, at this expected level, that's pretty much a break-even level. That's what the actuaries determine or indicate to us what we need to pay for losses for the coming year and to pay for operating expenses and reinsurance costs. So this is kind of the number that we've looked at because as a pool, we haven't tried to make a lot of money. We'd like to have a little bit of surplus, but we want to keep the rate stable. So this is our starting point. Now, let's see, what else did I want to point out here? Johnny gave me this idea that there's a ruin theory. Anybody heard of the ruin theory?
R-U-I-N?
Yes.
Have you heard of the ruin theory?
No, I just wanted to spell it. R-U-I-N?
Uh-huh. R-U-I-N. But it's a theory that if you consistently go with a break even on your revenue, that eventually you could go into financial ruin. So, you know, the board, the last few years, they've tried to go a little bit above this expected level so that, you know, they could continue to build a little bit of surplus. So this is the number we start at, or I start at when I start providing scenarios for the board, just so they can see if we only collect contributions in that amount, you know, we may not be making any surplus or having any surplus for the organization. So is there any questions on that? But if you can kind of look at these levels, these levels as we go, so 70, 80, 90% levels.
What are those percentages?
They're
That's
confidence levels that would say, you know, this would be a 70% confidence level that if, yeah. You're supposed to keep turning it over. Okay.
It's only a 30-second timer.
Oh, it's a 30-second, you timed it. Okay, anything else?
And then your contribution indications, you're saying this is where we expect, what's the bottom percentage? You're saying,
Okay, now this
I
one.
have 95% confidence in $8 million that I'm going to cover all my costs.
Uh-huh.
And here you're saying we expect to break even here.
Yes. Now this undiscounted is just what it says, undiscounted for investment income.
That breaks down to the lower one where you got your 1% return.
Yes.
Again, if you get a 2% return, that's going to reduce that again probably by about another 100,000.
Yes.
More than that, probably a good investment return is a little bit more.
Correct.
So your contribution.
So if we gave the actuaries a larger return on investment than the 1% that we've indicated, you know, these numbers would go down.
You
But-
guys are saying your payouts to operating costs, functionally, you expect to be $6 million or more than 70 a year, but you're going to get some interest, so you're going to see $70,000. But your contribution indication, negative 9.7%, what does that represent?
The 9.7?
Yeah, negative 9.7.
that's reduction from the current rate.
Oh, yes, reduction from the current. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying we're doing better than we did the prior year, so we can bring the rates down by 9%.
Yes. But, you know, in those, you know, hard years when we weren't making anything on investment income, the board kind of made it their practice to not use the discount. Just not even rely on the investment income. Anything investment income would go towards surplus.
And using a discounted rate would also require the auditors to put a note in our financial statements too, because it's frowned upon to use a discounted rate in the insurance industry.
All right, so you get footnoted if you use discounted rates.
Yes.
Yes.
And so to reiterate, you don't aim for the expected. You actually are a little more conservative.
Yes.
And so the premiums, the
Yes, so
contribution is in the.
if we go back here, the board, actually for 2019, the board did more of like they approved a 75% is what they ended up approving.
So,
So I gave them scenarios for all of these indications. And, you know, if we were to go up here, that's gonna mean, you know, a huge rate increase.
And this is,
For the
this
members.
9%, is this just a Z-score, statistical Z-score on confidence?
A Z-score, I'm not sure. Do you know, Johnny's a Z-score on the confidence? I haven't heard them use that.
They're just looking at, based on the new exposures and the 25 years of loss history, how many, the expected means that half the time that'll be enough money to cover us for the year.
Right, so
The
they're
70
using 25 years of history, probably a Z-score statistic, which just says, I need 5% confidence that if I get 8 million, I'm 100% covered.
No, that if you get, that if we collect 8 million, 9.5 years out of 10, that'll be enough.
That's what that's saying.
Yep.
so Sonia, where did we actually land on the contributions indication for 19 then?
We did
Kevin said we're
land-
between negative 2.1 and positive 3.4.
We ended up right here. This is what they finally approved. They approved 6.7.
So in terms of the contributions indication, what was the percentage? In other words,
Oh,
am I?
you mean here?
Yeah.
75%?
The rate change was less than
Rate.
1%.
It's an
But it was positive?
increase or flat.
It was
They-
positive, yes.
But, okay.
So that's the reason I wanted to show you this, is because the board had, so really this is not, it's based on, so we just take this number, they say we want to go higher than, the expected level, of course. With the new rating format we initiated in 2016 to go from net operating expenditures to employees. We've done a 3-year slight increase in rates so that you didn't have a huge hit when we did that formula change. And so this was the last year of that 3-year. And the board, when I ran the numbers with the rates, and we'll go through the rates next, that's where we ended up at. And that's what they approved, was a 7.5. So what I can show you here is she gives us when I say she, the actuary, she provides us this schedule as well. And this is where she comes up with the rates. So right here, these are the rates per law enforcement officer, per employee, so they're rating for public officials liability, the general liability for employees, and then our auto liability rate for the number of vehicles, and then our property rate is based on the total insured value times $100. So this rate here is based on the expected that you saw here. So then what we have to do is, as I give them scenarios for all of these other confidence levels, I have to manipulate the rates here. Because we have to end up, because she's ending up right here with her 6.1 on the expected level. Does that make sense? So we've asked her, so when we change the rating formula, this is how we did it for employees instead of the net operating expenditures.
This is where we say the true cost of the issue.
Yes. based on the losses, of course, you know, law enforcement's gonna have, you know, the most expensive losses. And so per law enforcement officer, she's giving a base rate of $1,200 per officer.
About 1,500 per quote.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right. I should have brought my glasses up. And the same thing here, so each employee, for public officials liability, $177 a year per employee. So these are the rates we start with as we go through our ratings.
Is this how you allocate rates for counties to by like officer head count?
Exactly.
Track this.
Yes. And this is based on all the exposures that you report to us. And these are full-time.
This is where I can pull down my auto rate and say, if I increase by this much dollars, this is what my exposure would be. And that's how you guys want to be on the sales.
Yes and no, not from this.
Okay.
But I'll show you. So then we have to rate for our $250,000 self-insured retention. So based on her rates that she has given us, we've given her all our expenses. So all our reinsurance costs, all our operating costs, what we anticipate in losses. And see this, we've given her an indication of what we anticipate to pay out in 1 year in losses. And that's where she's coming up with this amount.
Are these done off historical averages?
Yes. So this is the coverage areas that we rate for our $250,000 layer. So we're rating for all of these coverages, crime, cyber, drones, whether they're owned or non-owned, because we do have some facilities that use their property for training pilots for drone usage, so we've got an exposure there, liability exposure. Then we rate for the general liability, of course, law enforcement liability, and public officials liability. And then these are the rates we receive from County Reinsurance Limited. So these are all above our $250,000 layer. And you'll notice we have to work with, keep pushing the wrong one. We have to work with the different layers within CRL. So they have different rates from the 250 to 1 million layer, 1 million to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. So those are all different rates that are provided for those lines of coverage. Then we also purchase what we call flash coverage, defense, and terrorism coverage. And for the last 2 years, the premiums for these that are charged by CRL, we have not charged the members for those coverages. This is the first year, well, 2019 was the first year we started because we were losing surplus. So this was the first year we rated the members for these coverages. So when I send out your budget letters, this is what they look like. And these are the numbers, John, that you can use when you add a vehicle. So if you look here, this is just one member's. I took theirs as an example for you. So we give you what the statement of value was that you provided for all your property. So here's your property rate per $100 of value. So it's like 11 cents, like Johnny was talking about. So this is their contribution. Number of vehicles. This member had 153, so per vehicle, and I wish I was paying $207 a year for my you know, for my auto
So you start
insurance.
signing up.
I know, county employees, huh, we should get a benefit here. So on and so forth. So you can really actually look at this and rate, if you have a new building that you're looking at, you know, you can rate this out. I'm happy to do it for you. I get a lot of calls, you know, saying, oh, we're looking, the other day I got one, Uinta County, they're looking at breaking out their public safety into their own legal entity. And so they said, what would it cost to break that out? So I took all the law enforcement officers, the buildings, public safety building, the vehicles that were in the sheriff's department. And just by using these numbers, you know, I could break that out for them, what that was going to cost them as they determine if that's what they want to do. Are there any questions on this? The only other thing to point out, down here it says other exposures and coverages. So these really don't have a rate. I mean, I can give you a rate for those. I'm probably standing right anyway. But they're based on the total premium that CRL charges us for those coverages, and then based on the amount that you owe in premium for their rates. Does that make sense? So their excess rate, once I get a total that you would pay for that premium, then I back it out on what the actual cost is. So this member, they actually have a drone and they have a non-owned drone liability. This member does not have additional cyber limits, but this was just a form letter.
Are these rates consistent across counties, or are they different for each county?
These or these?
These up there. the top
They're consistent. All members are charged this. And that's why it's been so good, especially for the health departments that are our members and the county-related entities, because they don't have the law enforcement liability. And we were rating them based on their net operating expenditures, so their contributions, you know, they were subsidizing some of the member counties because their contribution was a lot higher. This is more fair and equitable among all the members. You know, if you have, that's why some of our members saw larger increases, because they've got a huge law enforcement liability. And that's the area where, you know, it's the highest rating. So they saw increases, but those with, you know, this is more fair and equitable, and we're glad that the board approved to do like a 3-year but now we're at that, now, you know, there's no rate stabilization that we're using, where if these are your exposures, those are the rates. And I don't anticipate these going up for 2020. I think we're going to be at a point where it'll just be stable. We can keep these rates stable. Any increase in your contribution is going to be because of your exposures. You know, if you add a $3 million building, your contribution is going to be more. So.
So if you have like a rate, it's going to be like 14,000.
You can rate it just like that. Johnny?
Yeah, so when the sheriff comes and says, I'm opening a new pod, and it's the middle of the year, you're not going to get charged in the middle of the year, but it's good to remind the commission that, okay, based on the current rate, those 10 new officers, next year when we get the contribution notice from UCIP, it's going to go up by 20 grand, because that's how much 10 law enforcement officers cost. We don't have to pay for them for the first 6 months, but they'll catch us at the beginning of the year, just so that they're aware of what that actual cost of opening a new pod is. And then when you've got the guys that are trying to save the money, like the question was asked, why are we, you know, we're going to take this old fire truck off because it's only worth 10 grand, and you know, we don't really need it, but we keep it around. Well, they save themselves $11 to have no coverage on that truck anymore.
Well, licensed vehicles.
Well, you're gonna pay the liability charge no matter what. What you can drop is you don't report it on the schedule for the physical damage.
For the property side.
Right.
But do I lose, every time I put a new vehicle on though, that's gonna add 207 to my
Right.
value
For
each
the-
year. So if I put on a bunch of new leased trucks on there, I'm putting on the 207, it might not hit my property value because they're leased. I don't know.
The leases usually require you to provide physical damage coverage on it.
Okay, so even if we take both, but if I take a fire truck that's, like I'm selling 4 trucks right now that we don't use. So if anyone needs any fire trucks, you take the whole back end off, make an RV, all sorts of cool stuff. But, so I should lose basically $800 a year for pulling them off as licensed vehicles. Right, because I have up here per vehicle plus my property value of those. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Right. When you sell them, that's how much your contribution next year will go down by.
Reduced by that, right, the
Right.
next time, because it won't be on this.
Right. But overall, almost every member, their fleet increases from one year to another.
Right.
So over time, you're saving a lot by not having us charge. Because, yeah, we don't give you money back when you sell a vehicle in the middle of the year, but we don't charge when you buy one in the middle of the year.
Retro 1 year, so you're not.
Right.
Just don't make me get rid of all my extra law enforcement officers.
You know, and another thing too, I want to point out, just to be fair with all the members. I mean, in the past, we've had some members that'll wait till January to add all their vehicles, the fleet that they purchased. And, you know, that's not rating. Some other member is ending up paying, so we appreciate it. And the thing is, the more accurate your data is when you report that on the schedules, you know, that's a great negotiating power we have with our excess carrier. I mean, they give us great rates. They, you know, we give them all our data. They can't believe how detailed and organized it is. So it helps us. It helps us with our rates and with our reinsurance carrier. Another thing before we leave.
Sonya, you got a question over here.
Oh, I got you.
Just, so we try to turn around about 10 or 15 vehicles every year. And so when I fill that out, do you want me to put down, it doesn't really matter how many vehicles I have right at that moment, but it's what I plan on having for the year. Is that
No, and I probably should.
okay?
I want you to report what you got,
Okay.
but we found that, you know, there was
Well, it's,
a member that was reporting like this huge fleet, you know, the first week of January.
well, I'm just thinking, so if depending on when I report that data, I may have 10 extra vehicles on that day, and then by July, I may actually have gotten rid of those.
And that's why we wait until
And then okay.
December.
Okay, so then it
So
would,
we are looking at your exposures up to December.
okay,
We like to have you look at them and update them by the end of June so we can get that other timeline handled.
So it'll work out either way.
Once we are given the rates, that's no problem. The rates are set in August by the board. Or approved, you know, what we've given them as far as rating indications. Then as of December, we figure, okay, this is the county's exposures as of December, and here's your contribution.
So if you've got those
Yeah.
10 extra vehicles in December, Randy,
Then it
tell
would-
us. And
Okay,
we'll
then it
we'll
would be an
figure
issue,
that
but
out,
it's
yeah.
always in the springtime when we do this, so.
Yeah,
And
then
that's
you're good.
fine, because we've got, your other vehicles are just not, you're just rolling them over. So, I wanted to point out on this member, specifically, in the next slides, I'm gonna go into equity and loss ratio. But here's the total contribution for the year for this member. This member has equity in the pool of $233,000. So we are hoping that all members will be that close to what they're paying in contribution. We'd like to have a 1-to-1 ratio there. To have, you have enough for 1 year contribution in equity. So they're really close. Another thing to consider though on this member, they have a loss ratio of 177%. So every dollar we're taking in for this member, we're paying out $1.77 in loss and expense.
Does that reduce their equity position?
It's considered, yes. But not every member's like that. Not every member has that high of loss ratio. But I just wanted to show you this as an example for this premium. So we're not trying, this member actually, we're losing money on this member.
Well, what Sonya's saying is they don't pay more. The premium, the contribution is not based on their loss ratio. We look at loss ratio when we pay dividends. And at the time that we pay a dividend out, members with higher loss ratios don't get dividend. Members that have a better than average loss ratio get more dividend. Because it's because of them that we have money to give back.
It's not neutral, right? You're just saying this year you had a higher than average loss ratio, you get 0 added to your equity balance. But you're not going to have a reduction of your equity balance.
Actually, the equity balance is based on the amount they pay in. The loss ratio doesn't go into the equity calculation. It only goes into the dividend payment calculation.
Yeah, but it's not a 1-to-1 calculation though, right? So if we have a really bad year at UAT, right? And let's say we have 200,000 in equity, our equity's not going to drop by 100,000.
No.
But it'll stay flat, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to climb with.
It will if we gain, if we have a net income or a net position that's positive at the end of the year. Like this year, our net position grew by 990,000. So that goes right into surplus. And so that calculation based on what you're paying.
Is that still real true plan?
Not necessarily. The only way the losses would affect you is the actuary considers losses for the whole group in her rating calculation.
Which will increase the overall base payment each year. I was just wondering how that affects the equity ratio that the member has.
The only way it would affect it is if we were to lose surplus.
And then you might pull from their equity on surplus.
We've never had to pull from equity. I don't
You
think
just
that
raise
would.
rates.
I don't think that's under the.
Well, the
equity.
equity is just a
Equity.
calculation. They distribute the overall equity of the pool amongst the members based on the proportionate contributions that each member pays in.
Right,
So,
so say you guys decide to close shop,
mhm,
these are the value of the assets, this is your equity position, you get X.
right, yes.
Is that ratio a yearly ratio or is it an overall
We're
ratio?
gonna go into.
Yeah, we look at both the
ratios
3 and
next.
5.
Yeah, I've got those.
So the rates are universal, right?
Yes.
So if Iron has a really bad loss experience 1 year, we're not going to have a higher rate. Everyone in the pool has the same rate.
Yes.
But if all of a sudden law enforcement gets more expensive on the whole, then that the actuary is going to come back and say, instead of $1,588 per employee, it's now $1,700, right?
Yeah.
But that's pool wide, not.
Yes, pool wide. That's why your members are, because this, this is great for this member. They're getting this, they almost have this much in equity, and they're getting their losses paid that are at 177% loss ratio. That's a real benefit.
And that's the discussion to have when you're having your ice cream tomorrow.
Because everybody in this room, you've been there at one point or another. Where you've been over 100% for a 3-year period.
So, I was going to go into equity allocations first, but maybe I should go into loss ratio since we're talking about that. So, based on what our 2018, well, no, I take that back, so never mind that comment. So what the actuary provides us is a 5-year combined loss ratio. And that was their 5-year combined loss ratio for that member. They could have been under 100% sometime during that 5-year, but then they had a really bad year that brought them up even higher. As you can see, from 2000, so the 5-year, and we take out 2018 because not all losses have been recorded as of this report for 2018. So we're just going through the 2013 through 2017. And right now, as a whole, the pool is at 104%. So we are, you know, we like to be under 100, of course. 11 of the 22 equity members. Now, equity members are the counties. They're the ones that started the pool. It's written in the interlocal, so, you know, non-equity members, the health departments, the related entities, they do not gain equity. Yes. So 11 of the 22 equity members are over 100% loss ratio. So it's half. Half of you are over 100%. So that, I mean, I guess as a pool, you can say, okay, you know, this year you're subsidizing us. So that's, you know, that's even. The highest equity member ratio is 260%. So for every dollar we're collecting from them, and this, I'll tell you, it's a small county because they have hardly any exposures, so their contribution is low, but their losses are high. The lowest, look at this guy, that's nice. You know, that'd be nice if we were all at that. But the non-equity members, so these are all the special districts, they're at 63%, but we had a huge loss in one of our equity or non-equity members, and we're showing about a 94 now. So what it's anticipated for 2018. But we aren't showing that here, like I said, because all those losses haven't been
So
reported.
if we have a 5-year loss ratio of over 100% based on contributions, are we able to make that up simply because we have enough equity and then aren't making that much in interest, or are we just losing? I mean, I can't imagine we're decreasing our equity overall over that 5-year period.
No, and I'm going to show you another slide that'll show our equity growth.
Okay.
So maybe I kind of put these out of the wrong order. I don't know. But let's go back to the equity calculations. So we have 22 equity members. The total contribution from when we first started, look at that number. That's a crazy number, 95 million. But that's from so the 27 years. So this is how the actuary calculates this. The equity that we've earned in those from 92 to 2018, since we have that number for financial purposes now, that's our equity, 8 million. And I know that probably doesn't look like a lot of money, but you know, that's been the philosophy of the pool and the board. You know, they aren't trying to keep your money. They don't want $8 million of money in UCIP when the counties use it. So we're just trying to keep enough equity in there. You know, we've got enough to pay losses. This is over losses. We reserve for our losses. Yes.
What's your cash ratios? Cash liquid assets?
Liquid assets.
Well,
That's all.
yeah.
So, was that
We have-
the assets of the land and all?
This is only surplus,
Or anything like that?
only surplus. So this is the member's surplus. This is the exact number that is allocated for all of your equity.
From a liquidity standpoint, again, most of our assets, most of those reserves are in PTIF, which is cash liquid, so
Yeah.
over 70%.
So we're not putting any like buildings or any of those things into an equity position?
The only thing we have there is we own a piece of property where we thought about building a building several years back, 10 years ago, and when we ran the net present value numbers on it, it would have taken us 30 years to start saving money on owning our own building, so we never moved forward with that. But we still own the piece of property.
And that's in your equity calculation because it's just an asset that you can
Yes.
sell?
Yes.
Or reasonably quickly?
It is an asset on this balance sheet, yeah.
Well, and I should have gone a little bit farther. This is actually the net equity right here. So what we had, we started out with this amount for equity. Our workers' compensation program that was self-funded from 2003 to 2009 went into a deficit. So this reduced our equity. Well, no, there was more. Then dividends, we provided dividends 1 year to the members. That's taken out, so actually this is our total. Which, you know, as a pool, we want to be at 100%, a 1-to-1 ratio with what we collect in contribution to what our net position is or the net equity we have. And so members that have a 1-to-1 ratio right now with their equity is 11 again. So 11 members are at a 1-to-1 ratio with what their contribution is. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And actually, I think I calculated for next year,
Is that
if, go ahead.
or to be 10 then because you do dividends and you get like nice returns on interest or other things? Is that your plan to stay with one?
Yes, we do have that plan.
Is 104% normal among pools like us nationwide, or is that high?
Do you
Low?
know that on, Johnny, on the CRL members? Do you know what their,
Most pools are under 100%. They underwrite to under 100%, which they're just charging their members more. Because when they do their rate making analysis, they're doing an 80% at least confidence level in order to build surplus and equity. So, but it's not horrible. I mean, there's segments of the industry, like the workers' comp industry, where insurers overall run about 115 to 120% loss ratio, make it all up in investment income. But as pools, we can't make it up that big of a split up in investment income. So we have to be closer to that 100% than the standard industry.
so I'm predicting if we have any more equity growth for this year, we could have a possible of 17 members out of the 22 that will be over or have the 1-to-1 ratio. Because we've got so many close to 95 percentile, so we could have more. So that's kind of a plan. That's a good plan. Any other questions on the equity or the loss ratio? Okay, then here's I don't know what this is. It's a charge that in my mind I was thinking it might be a good display, and I guess in a way it is. So what I did here for the financial position, these three top ones are revenue. These three lines here are expense, and this is actually a revenue too. So hopefully you can see on your in front of you Yes, but let me explain my madness on this. So what I did is I used 2015 to 2018 because my draft financials are done and off to the auditor. So I'm using that number for 2018. And 2015 to 2018 was when we had the same members. We had a member leave in 2014. So I kind of wanted to do this just based on our membership now, counties. There is some growth in here for related entities that have joined the pool. So if you'll notice, this top blue line, this is our contribution. Now here, the board approved a rate increase because based on the net asset management plan, they want to, the board approved to have between, they always wanted to have, let me see if I can look my notes because I want to make sure it's they wanted to manage assets at between 50%, they didn't want it to drop below 50% and to 50%. So if you look here at contributions, this is our equity line. We're there's a pretty big gap here between the contributions and the equity. This is a 62%. So we were dropping down to 62% on surplus. So the board being proactive, they raised rates a bit here, plus additional members helped to bridge this gap, this 62%. So we didn't, so they didn't get down to the 50%. So you can see what a good plan that was because we did increase equity between 2015 and 2016. So we're bridging that gap. Now look where we're at. That's where I showed you that we were at the 92% of contribution here. So in my mind, that was a good display, but I wanted to kind of show you where we were at for the last 4 years. Now this line is our losses line. So we had quite a huge loss year here in 2017, but our 2018, and these are paid losses, these aren't reserves, these are just paid. So equity grew because our losses were down. So we had a lot more equity. This line is our reinsurance, right? Yeah, reinsurance. Reinsurance operating, and you can see we've been able to negotiate our reinsurance costs. We've been able to keep the operating expenses stable, even though we've added more members. Right now our membership is at 63 members we have now. This little slight increase is because of those members in our reinsurance costs. So I thought this was a good display in my mind. Do you have any questions on this?
So, has the goal for a while been the equity to be kind of on parity with contributions? Is that correct?
It was the board's target for years to have a 1-to-1 ratio, like a general fund in your financials. That's the cap. You can't go above a 1-to-1. And the board kind of thought that we should manage ourselves like a county in that respect for a long time. So they set that 1-to-1. That's why we paid out the one dividend that year, because we reached the 1-to-1 and exceeded it. So we brought ourselves back down to the 1-to-1 by paying the dividend. But then we had new auditors come in and they said, well, wait a minute, you're not a general fund, you're an enterprise fund. You're not limited by 1-to-1. So at that point, we hired a separate actuarial group that doesn't do our actuarial work to do a specific study on how much capital we should have, how much equity we should have. And they did a study based on if we wanted to be an A-rated insurance carrier, how much should we have? Well, they told us we should have at least 18 million in equity. So more of a 3 to 1.
So that really changed the,
So the board took a look at that, realized that's way more money than they want to hold of the membership's money. And 1 to 1, and they now, their target now is to control equity between 100 and 200%. So we're trying to get above 100, and once we're above 100, once we go over 200, they may pay a dividend. If it gets to 250, they shall pay a dividend to keep us from being the bank of the Utah counties. That is not the intent of our board.
but again, you won't be seeing a dividend at 115%.
We might. They could do that. They can do
We wrote
a
the laws,
dividend.
they will if you get over 250, but they can't anytime over 100.
Right.
So to compare and contrast then, if you're a private insurer for catastrophic loss, is that why they would like that number higher? But you reinsure, so it doesn't have to be, is that correct?
Right, and in the insurance industry, their market is much more, fluctuates a lot more than ours. I mean, you guys have been with us for 25 years now.
You know what you're
Right.
to get, yeah.
So we don't have market fluctuation like the traditional insurance companies do, and we have a very homogeneous risk and all of those sorts of things that are reasons why we wouldn't need to have 18 million in capital. To have, when we're bringing in 6 million a year, to have 12 million of reserve would be, our board feels is more than adequate. We want to be between 6 and 12 million of equity.
I like to brag on you, so it's good to understand the nuances.
Just another point of interest too. This increase, overall, or the average from all of these years was about a 6%. But when I looked at your exposures and the increase in exposure, which affects the contribution, we had a 6% increase in the statement of value, so all your buildings, all of that, we had an increase of 6%. Full-time employees increased by 11%, and full-time law enforcement increased by 2%. So that's affecting the contribution as well, not just the rates. So, anything else on that? And then I just quick did a slide on workers' comp, or just what the rates were doing as far as NCCI rates based on the losses and payroll. So they do change every year. So that just kind of gives you an indication of the required classification codes for Utah for county government. And those are, I thought that might be a nice little chart for you. And here's UCIP size discount for its members. We have 24 members in our workers' comp joint purchase with WCIP. And then also what's good to see, since we joined WCIP in 2010, these are the dividend history based on your premium. So 10% of your premium was given back to you in dividends. So